973-7425. You can also text the word recipe to that number. I know I forgot to hit send on the taco recipe yesterday. I'll send it out. Text the word recipe to 877-973-7425. Same number you call in. You can text with it. I'll get the shrimp taco recipe out later. Look, I got to begin here, and I don't mean to offend people, but I watched that coverage yesterday. I had to drive to Atlanta, and I had it actually on. I had it on the satellite radio, listening to the coverage, and I was flipping between the stations. I listened to some of Fox. I listened to some of CNN. I listened to some of MSNBC. I realized here is what the media heard when the media was covering the inauguration yesterday. This was the background music in their head. You know it, and I know it. I mean, you know that the whole new world from Aladdin, that was in the back of the head of everybody on every network. I mean, Chris Wallace on Fox News, this was one of the greatest inaugural addresses of all time. Listen, it was a good speech as those speeches go. It was very thematic for Joe Biden. But I didn't think it was, I thought Reagan gave better inaugural addresses. And suddenly we're having like media-gasms as it's like Joe Biden is the Energizer Bunny battery for the media right now. The way the media was hearing all of this. Here's the soundtrack that I was hearing to the media coverage. I mean, this is the sort of stuff they were talking about. I mean, some heavy breathing in there. It was almost NC-17 coverage. I mean, if you listen carefully, it was like, as somebody on Twitter said, it was like a Zoom meeting all day long with Jeffrey Toobin watching the media coverage of the Biden inaugural. I mean, these people, you would think for 4 years. In fact, I saw somebody, a blue check mark brigade, say, well, I can't even say what they were saying on the radio, but basically moisture was returning to certain areas of people's body. It just absolutely positively disgusting watching it, which is no wonder that there was a buddy of mine just texted and said, all I was hearing was Highway to Hell. Given the media coverage of Biden yesterday, it is no wonder that Axios has this story here. Trust in traditional media has declined to an all-time low, and many news professionals are determined to do something about it. No, they're not. Faith in society, central institutions, especially in government and the media, is the glue that holds society together. The glue was visibly dissolving a decade ago and has now, for many millions of Americans, disappeared entirely. For the first time ever, fewer than half of all Americans have trust in traditional media. 56% of Americans agree with the statement that journalists and reporters are purposefully trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or grossly exaggerated. The other 47% of people, or 44% of people, clearly aren't even watching the news. 58% of people think that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. When Edelman repolled Americans after the election, the figures have deteriorated further. 57% of Democrats trust the media. Only 18% of Republicans trust the media. Well, see right there, that's how the media will dismiss this. Oh, well, we got a majority of Democrats. Why do we need to change? The numbers are echoed across the world. They're mostly not a function of Donald Trump's war on fake news. As vaccine rumor hunter Heidi Larson put it, we don't have a misinformation problem. We have a trust problem. News organizations have historically relied mainly on advertising income, and as those dollars flow increasingly to Google and Facebook, it's created institutional weakness that shows up in trust data. Reversing the decline is a monster task, and one that some journalists and news organizations have taken upon themselves. They're going to need help, perhaps from America's CEOs. Essentially, what they're going to do is force you to like the media. Honest to goodness. Listen to the, I mean, this was on MSNBC yesterday. How can you trust this sort of news coverage?
Strangeness of the social distancing and the masks and everything else. And yet, you know, the thing that was, to me, so striking about today was that kind of comforting sense, even with the masks, even with the distancing, even without the crowd, you know, those shots inside Statuary Hall that we're familiar with, you know, from every inauguration, the sight of the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas, you know, the Avengers, you know, sort of the Marvel superheroes back up there together, all in one place, well, with their friend Joe Biden, all of them, I think, feeling like that all of them sharing that same view that a lot of Americans had, which is that, you know, we did narrowly avert catastrophe in America, and that they were all there to kind of, you know, to buttress their buddy Joe Biden and see him in some ways as the natural and necessary corrective to what's been going on.
How can you trust that sort of commentary? Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you expect that the next major commenter on there's going to be Ron Jeremy or somebody from 1970 style porn. It's disgusting. The slobbering across news networks. And by the way, it wasn't just MSNBC.
We must end this uncivil war, and the way we can do it is if we show each other a little tolerance and humility. Martha, I thought it was a great speech. I've been listening to these inaugural addresses since 1961, John F. Kennedy, Ask Not. I thought this was the best inaugural address I ever heard.
I thought this was the best inaugural address I ever heard from Chris Wallace. Wouldn't it be nice if we had members of the media who weren't swept up in the moment, who were willing to be skeptical of the claims made, who were willing to ask the Democrats the same level of questions they would ask the Republicans? Pete Ducey from Fox News is already being attacked by members of the media for the audacity of breaking the moment. How did Pete Ducey of Fox News break the moment? He actually asked a question of the White House press secretary.
So if President Biden wants a theme of his presidency to be unifying the country, does he think that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer should drop a potentially divisive Senate impeachment trial?
Well, he spoke today, as you all saw, about unity in his inaugural address and the importance of unity in bringing the country together, and the resolve of the American people in helping to get through this moment. You know, we are confident, though, that just like the American people can, the Senate can also multitask, and they can do their constitutional duty while continuing to conduct the business of the American people. And his view is that the way to bring the country together is to address the problems we're facing. And so that means getting this COVID relief package through, having Democrats and Republicans take a serious look at that and have conversations with each other about how to move it forward. And he's going to leave the mechanics, the timing, and the specifics of how Congress moves forward on impeachment to them.
And a quick follow-up. On President Trump's inauguration day, he filed paperwork to run for re-election, saying that does President Biden have any plans to do that today, late, or in the coming days?
I will say, having talked to him today, his focus is not on politics. It is on getting to work and solving the problems of the American people.
How dare Pete Ducey ask those questions? Most of the reporters were, how is he going to restore trust to the office and be nice to us? I mean, my goodness gracious, if you had taken a blue light to the press room yesterday, it would have glowed like the 4th of July. Speaking of, Joe Biden has brought Bill Clinton's rug back into the Oval Office. I hope they got the stains out of it. Listen, I could spend the next 4 years on media hypocrisy. I could. Absolutely, fundamentally spend all of this time just on, hey, the media covered it one way, now they're covering another. They're already moving the goalposts on the COVID relief stuff. They're saying, oh, it was all Donald Trump's fault. We're not going to be able to hit the goal Joe Biden promised of 100 million vaccinations. It's all Donald Trump's fault. It was an arbitrary goal. Let's pick a round number and say we're going to give this many people injections. We're over 1 million a day We're doing great. We're continuing to escalate every day. And it's let's pick an arbitrary number, and then we're not going to meet it, so it's going to be blame Trump. This for the next 4 years is what we're going to see, by the way. A media that would never let Donald Trump get away with blaming Obama. Well, it was Donald Trump's fault. Nope. Americans are dying. 400,000 Americans have died of COVID. If Donald Trump got sworn in yesterday and 400,000 people had died of COVID, the media would be, what are you going to do? How dare you? You own these 400,000. But not with Joe Biden. Everything is grand and glorious now that Joe Biden is in the White House. I did think it was kind of funny yesterday. The Washington Post, he's got a big bust of Cesar Chavez behind him in the Oval Office. The Washington Post identified it as Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, seriously, they actually identified. Now, he's got a bust of Eleanor Roosevelt in his office for reasons I have no idea why. But the media actually identified the Cesar Chavez bust as, or the Washington Post did at least. I shouldn't say the media. The Washington Post actually did identified Cesar Chavez as Eleanor Roosevelt. Oh my goodness gracious, we are in for just a craziness. Now, not everyone is happy. The far-left Antifa protesters are burning down Portland, Oregon. They're back in the headlines. They're rioting in Portland, Oregon. But here's the thing. Day before yesterday, these were patriots taking a stand against the man, Donald Trump. But now Joe Biden is president. And the media is very upset. The media is not happy now that the same people who were rioting 2 days ago that they heralded as heroes are still rioting. It's bad now. It is bad. It's bad. Something's got to happen to these bad people who are burning down Joe Biden. It was okay when it was Donald Trump's America. You could burn down Donald Trump's America. But now it's Joe Biden's, and members of the press are deeply upset, horrified. It's just kind of pathetic to see the double standard flip so fast. And again, this gets back to the Axios report from Edelman, a trusted PR firm in Washington that's been surveying this. Edelman's annual trust barometer. 56% of Americans believe journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or grossly exaggerated. 58% say most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. And I think that's true. I very much think it's true. I think it's true on the right and the left. I think it's as true now for CNN as it is for Fox. I think it's as true for OAN as it is for MSNBC. It was remarkable yesterday seeing Chuck Todd, who I know and I like the guy, but I definitely think he's of the left. But Chuck Todd commented on how he's not a person of faith, but it was just remarkable to see Joe Biden so committed to his faith yesterday. And Savannah Guthrie chimed in that she is a person of faith, and she thought it was tremendous. For a Republican, if it was George W. Bush, forget Donald Trump for a minute, if it was George W. Bush who took his faith very seriously, they'd be attacking him across media networks for being a theocrat. That's what they did, by the way. That's what they did. That George Bush was pro-life because he was a Christian theocrat. But Joe Biden, who prays and has priests around him, but is perfectly happy to sacrifice children at the altar of Moloch, he takes his faith so seriously that he ignores it all other than the performative stunts in public. The media double standard at play. See, here's the problem for the media right now. They think that with Donald Trump gone, everything's going to be okay. The problem is with Donald Trump gone, people are going to be even more attuned to their double standards and how they cover stuff. And even more distrust of the media is going to grow. And it's going to deteriorate the American trust in truth further and open the door to more crackpot theories. QAnon will have just been the beginning, and it will just be the beginning because the American media has never accounted for its own role in the growth of institutions like QAnon.
There's not my truth or your truth. There is only...
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You want another double standard here? One more. Joe Biden has fired the National Labor Relations Board's General Counsel, Peter Robb. This is from Bill McMorris at the Free Beacon. President Joe Biden fired an independent federal labor regulator within hours of taking office on Wednesday in an unprecedented move cheered by labor unions. Within minutes of his inauguration, Joe Biden threatened to fire National Labor Relations Board General Counsel Peter Robb if he did not voluntarily resign his position as the top prosecutor at the agency. Robb, whose 4-year term was set to expire in November, rebuked Biden's demands, saying it would undermine the independence of the agency and the enforcement of federal labor law. It was my understanding that the incoming administration intended to foster civility and unity in this country and in the governing of this country promised to adhere to the rule of law and enabling its chief law enforcement officers the independence free from White House interference to enforce the laws of the United States, Robb said in a letter obtained by Bloomberg Law. A presidential removal of the NLRB's general counsel prior to the expiration of his or her term violates these promises and principles. On Wednesday evening, the Biden administration made good on the threat and fired Robb. Shortly after signing a proclamation calling a National Day of Unity, he fired Robb, according to Bloomberg. The Trump appointee indicated in his letter that the new administration's Office of Presidential Personnel emailed the resignation demand at 12:23 p.m., shortly after Biden took his oath of office. Robb's a career management-side labor attorney. He drew the wrath of labor unions for attempting to reorganize the agency and shift enforcement of federal labor laws. In December, labor giant SEIU, which spent nearly $25 million on the election, privately lobbied Biden to sack Robb. Now, this is important because the general counsels of these agencies are considered independent. When Trump came in, he did not fire the Obama-era general counsels. He waited them out. But Biden comes in day one and fires the guy. If it was Donald Trump, how would the media cover it? But it's Joe Biden. So how is the media covering it? Largely, they're not. Largely, the mainstream media is ignoring it. Bloomberg Law covers it because it's their beat. Everyone else largely ignoring it. If a Republican did this, not just Donald Trump now, if a Republican did this, what do you think the response would be from the media? It would be outright outrage over suggestions of corruption. But they're giving Joe Biden a pass. They're giving Joe Biden a honeymoon. This is what we can expect with the media. This is what they're going to do. For 4 years, we will have to be vigilant and point this stuff out. And it will further erode people's trust in the media when you point this stuff out. But it's necessary. They're not going to learn their lesson. They're not going to understand. They've got to stop picking sides and cover stuff accurately, even-handedly, fairly, equally. They're all about equity these days, unless it comes to covering Democrats versus Republicans. Now, we'll move on. President Trump, contrary to the expectations of many, left Joe Biden a letter in the Oval Office. I don't know what it said. I have no idea. Joe Biden won't say.
Mr. President, Mr. President, what did President Trump write to you?
You guys, let's go, please, let's go.
The President wrote a very generous letter. It's because it was private. I will not talk about it until I talk to him, but it was generous.
A generous letter from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. Good. I'm glad Donald Trump did that. And Mike Pence yesterday, Donald Trump thanked him very graciously before he left for Florida. And now the world moves on. The Democrats controlling all of Washington for the first time since 2009. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. So what is the agenda? What is the agenda? Well, the agenda for the Biden administration is essentially going to be a return to the Obama era. So let's talk about unity. Joe Biden said a lot about unity in his speech. He's been fairly consistent over the last several months, unity. Well, what sort of unity does he want? There is a unity of the states and a unity of the people where we view each other as Americans and we civilly agree to disagree. And maybe that's the unity Joe Biden wants. Maybe that's the unity. The unity of agreeing to peacefully disagree, to have our disagreements, but recognize that there will be people who win and people who lose. And we should not demonize the side that loses. Now, I suspect that if this is the unity they want, this is the unity that they get until the Republicans take back control of Congress, and then suddenly they'll be racist and bigots and homophobes again. What is the unity? Here's the problem. Joe Biden, one of the very first things he did yesterday was push the left's full-on agenda through executive orders. He signed an executive order yesterday that boys have to be allowed on girls' sports teams, despite there being fundamental biological differences between boys and girls, that if a boy decides he's a girl, you got to put him on your daughter's sports team, whether you like it or not. Let him in their bathroom. Let him in. This is a cultural issue for which there really isn't any common ground. The Biden administration says they want science-based policies, and yet this isn't science-based. This is psychobabble nonsense to make a very small but very vocal group of progressives happy. Where's the unity in that? Where's the unity in that? See, the problem here is what sort of unity is Biden getting? I can grant, concede, and give Joe Biden the unity of let's stop assuming that the other side, when we disagree with them, is evil and out to destroy the country. There are people who want to destroy the country on both sides. There are people who are evil on both sides. But it's probably not the person you're thinking of right now. It's probably not the person you hate. The QAnon people who have inspired a bunch of people to storm the Capitol, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, and the like, evil. Donald Trump and his supporters, not evil. The Antifa BLM activists who burn down cities, vandalize businesses, shake down businesses to demand they put signs in their door, evil. The BLM activists who just want justice and want police reform, not evil. The people who support abortion, not evil. Sinners, not evil. The people who want you to have to force you to take your money to perform abortions and do abortion on demand and make sure abortion is taught and forced on people, evil. You must distinguish, I think, between the sinner and the evil. We're all sinners in various ways. You know, I used to think, I did used to think, and just don't tune me out immediately when I say this, please, because some of you will want to. Just follow my thinking here. And you can call in and disagree with if you want. I used to think you couldn't be a Christian if you supported abortion. I now think you can, but that you're a sinner and it's a sin, and I have an obligation and your church has an obligation to explain to you why it's a sin. And the moment you and your church embrace the idea that it's not a sin and it's a sin for you to silence it, that's when it becomes evil. So we are all sinners. The number of friends of mine I know who engage in sinful conduct, every single person I know, none of them are evil in my mind. There's a difference. In the same way, with this talk of unity, I can give Joe Biden the idea of unity where we can be a United States of America with 50 states that are unique and disagreeable with each other and still remain for the greater good without thinking that the other side is evil or bad. Let them have their way. But the problem here, and this gets into the problem with Joe Biden's thinking on this, is that Joe Biden comes from a liberal progressive worldview where it's one size fits all for everybody, and you can't have a federalist discussion or a federalist breakdown. You can't have California saying let boys on your sports team and Georgia say no and see who does better. No, it's got to be one size fits all for Washington. You can't have Georgia come up with its health care plan and California come up with its. No, it's got to be one size fits all for Washington. When everything is one size fits all from Washington, what you do is you have the smallest group of sinners with the largest amount of power. I tell people all the time, I'm a conservative because I believe we're all sinners, and I want as few in charge of me as possible, so I support small government. Joe Biden wants a big Washington government, so a handful of sinners who are sinners with plenary power, with massive amounts of power. And that's what we saw yesterday with his executive orders. Joe Biden wants to wipe out the Keystone XL pipeline. There's no unity in that. That's wiping out 11,000 American jobs. Do those 11,000 people who are now going to lose their jobs feel very unified with Washington, D.C.? Probably not. So I can give him the nuance of unity, where in the nuance of unity, we recognize we're not going to agree on policy and we shouldn't demonize each other for that disagreement. But I have a hard time believing the left is going to keep to that. Here's something Joe Biden said yesterday.
Feels it. The people you can count on are the ones that starts from the gut, works the way to the heart, and have the intellectual capacity to do what needs to be done. And so, folks, we have a lot going on. We have a lot of opportunities. We can meet this existential threat of climate change. I really believe it. Again, the world has figured out. The United States has figured out. Whoa, it makes a gigantic difference. Makes a gigantic difference. These unseen threats, air you can't breathe, living on fence-line communities and the like. So much more we can do. We have such an awful lot to do, but I know you. I know your heart, your dedication, your commitment to this nation. And I know you can do it. And we're going to do it by leading with one core American value: humility and trust, collegiality, diversity, competency, and family. And I want to thank your families for the sacrifices. But I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Everybody is entitled to be treated with decency and dignity. That's been missing in a big way the last 4 years. Kathy's gone through all your backgrounds, talked to me about you. I'm confident you have the capacity to do it.
Everyone's entitled to be treated with dignity and respect, and they'll be fired on the spot if they disrespect someone. Again, he's the new president. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, because I think that's what we should do for all new presidents. I did it with Trump. I did it with Obama. I did it with Bush. I'll do it with Biden. But I'm not holding my breath on this, because the tendency of the left in the media, in politics, and the like is to paint everyone on the right, particularly traditional Christians, as hateful bigots, theocrats who want to impose their view. Apparently, no one's allowed to impose their view on anyone anymore, unless you're the left. If you have a moral foundation with which you make your decisions, and it is a Christian worldview, you can be a hateful bigot. If you're not down with transgenderism, for example, because bigots. God made us male and female. Biology says we're either male or female, and we don't get to decide. Well, you know what? You're a hateful bigot. If you believe boys shouldn't be on the girls' sports team because biology trumps gender identity when it comes to athleticism, well, you're a hateful bigot. If you believe that children should not be wantonly murdered for convenience and call it abortion, well, guess what? You are a misogynist. You want to control women's bodies. Joe Biden could actually do something if he demanded that his side of the aisle as a whole behave differently. Because then you could legitimately make the claim, listen, I'm making my side behave differently, better, nicer, more civilly, even when we disagree. You got to do the same. And it would set you apart. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that. I'm not going to hold my breath for the unity that the left interprets this is, because what the left interprets this is fiat, that we're going to be unified and we're going to go in Joe Biden's direction, and if you don't want it, tough. There's your unity. I would genuinely love to get to an America where we can have civil disagreements with each other in matters of politics and policy and not presume that the guy who disagrees with me is evil. And I myself do try to do that and actually do it and get hate from my own side for saying, I can't believe you'd say that. That person's evil. How can you be friends with someone on the other side? Well, how can you be friends with a sinner? How can you draw someone to the body of Christ who isn't there if you say, well, that person, they don't know Jesus, I can't be friends with them? No, you're supposed to go do that. You're supposed to be witness. How can I draw someone to my side politically? Because, well, I can't be friends with that person. I've just got to yell at him and try to beat him at the ballot box. You got to be friends with people who disagree with you if you're going to persuade them to your side, or at least seek for them to understand you. And part of the problem we have in the country now is that neither side understands the other. Neither side wants to understand the other. If your presumption immediately is they disagree with me on this cultural issue, therefore they're evil, as opposed to we're all sinners, this is their sin, let me see if I can be friends with them and persuade them, we got problems. Now, Joe Biden is a product of a Washington, D.C. from 40, 50 years ago, where you actually did have friends on the other side and you tried to find common ground, where neither side really sacrificed principle so much as they sacrificed their preferred policy positions and reached a common ground that they could both agree on. Maybe he'll do that. The problem is he's surrounded with the horde of Mordor that wants to march across the country and punish anyone who disagrees with left-wing orthodoxy. There's a difference between Joe Biden and the people around Joe Biden. Joe Biden may believe these things, but will the people around him believe these things? The Washington press corps may be orgasmic with the belief that the Biden administration is a turning point of civility in America, but it's the civility of an elite in Washington, D.C. who really have nothing in common with the people of Macon, Georgia, or Clarksville, Georgia, or Vidalia, Georgia. It's the politics of an elite where abortion on demand is a preferred policy. It's the politics of the elite where liberalism and wokeness and social justice advocacy are the preferred policies. And it is the global political elite in this country who believe that it is a social good for them to pull everyone else up by their bootstraps in a way that makes them realize that woke progressivism is a net good. And that's not very unifying when you have the woke warriors of the Biden administration tell conservative heartland Americans that they're bad people or they're bigots or they're misogynists or they're racist or sexist or homophobes or whatever, because they have a cultural value system that they believe is good and true, and the cultural coastal elite tell them no. This isn't going to end well. Joe Biden is going to have to model this. If he wants unity and disagreement, he's going to have to model it, and he's going to have to force those in his administration to model it. And I don't know that he can do that, whether you take him at his word or not.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric has a
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Cliff in Warner Robins, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Sure.
I have a point about unity, and you'll say it's a strange comparison, but someone I have studied the life of, and his bust is in the Rotunda in Washington, Alexander Stevens, who was Vice President of the Confederacy, is being criticized for being a secessionist, which he was not, by the way. If you study his life, he fought hard to keep Georgia in the Union, and he only went along with it when they succeeded. And but that's another story there. His one biggest mistake or error or sin was he believed whites were superior to blacks. And you say, well, they got to do with unity today. What are the left saying? They're superior to the right, morally, intellectually, and all the other ways. And that is the same sin he was guilty of. It's just he put it with a color. They're putting it with a...
You know, Cliff, that's actually a really good point, and they want to move him out of the Capitol and replace him with John Lewis, which I'm fine with them doing, given that he was the Vice President of the Confederacy. But to Cliff's point here, you know, here's let me add a little more to what Cliff is saying here. When you listen to, for example, the hosts on MSNBC, one of the prevailing talking points in the last several weeks was that the Biden administration wouldn't be political. That it wouldn't be political. And what they're essentially saying is they believe progressivism is not a political ideology. That their way of doing things is the right way. It's not a political way. You know, it reminds me one time at CNN, I had a dear friend at CNN who said there is a bias in the media. She recognized the bias. And what I needed to understand about it, and I think this holds up over time, is that it's not a per se liberal bias. Now, follow along with me here. You need to pay attention to this one because I think there's some merit here. At CNN, I would often complain about the left-wing bias in the media, even at CNN, and they would let me do it on television to their credit. A friend of mine, though, one time said, you know, it manifests itself as a liberal bias. And to a degree it is, but it's more nuanced than that. It's actually a good governance bias or a good government bias. It is the belief that government does good for people, which of course comes from liberalism, which she acknowledged, but that's what it is, that conservatives are at a natural disadvantage in the press because conservatives believe the less government, the better for people to lead their own lives. And most people in the media who cover the government believe the government does good, and therefore those who wish to call for less government are advocating a policy that will hurt people. And conservatives need to understand that when they approach the media and have conversations on television with a group of people who are of the media, particularly reporters, not just your standard right-left balance, that you need to understand going in when you're talking to a reporter trying to explain to it that you've got to be able to state, you don't have to defend it, show it, prove it, but you need to recognize their bias and explain to them, I believe this helps people by getting the government out of the way because, so that they understand you too want the good for people and not just government is bad. And you know, I thought it was a very profound and honest and candid statement coming from someone who is a CNN analyst who I know and deeply respect, the level of honesty and candor there. That it is a liberal bias, but it comes from the belief that government does good for people, when conservatives believe oftentimes government makes the situation worse. And you hear that on MSNBC and the like with the left. They don't believe it's an ideology. They don't believe progressivism is an ideology. They believe it's just the way of life. It's right thinking. It's the way to do things. You heard Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC talking about how the Biden administration would be less political. No, it's very political. It's just the politics she agrees with, so she doesn't see it as political. She sees it as the right way of doing things. It's a very telling statement when someone in the media believes that a political group that ran a political campaign, that took a political office, will not be political. It's exposing hypocrisy in the media. and there is that double standard, and you got to be mindful of it. In particularly how if you go on TV, for instance, if you go on CNN, how you do that. I actually like the opportunities to go on CNN as a conservative because what they tend to do is they bring in a lot of people who they're conservative, but they never wanted to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt. They never liked him at all. Anything he did was bad. And to be able to make the case that, actually, he made us energy independent. Actually, this was a good thing. Actually, this created jobs. It's staggering when it's like I've never heard someone on CNN say these things before. I kind of enjoy doing that. I don't mind being the turd on the punch bowl, so to speak, for some of these people. They need to recognize that not everything Donald Trump did was bad. He actually did a lot of good, created a lot of jobs, and helped a lot of people. And they've never even considered it. They think everything they do is fine, glorious, dandy, hunky-dory, and not political, when actually there's some hyper-partisans and hyper-political in the press. They just don't want to recognize it or admit it. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the nation now. The phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. If you'd like to be a part of the program, we will get into some of the Georgia news here in a bit. And tomorrow, I actually, he can't do it live tomorrow. So this afternoon, I'm sitting down with Governor Kemp to have a pretty lengthy conversation with him. And we'll bring that to you here on the program tomorrow. I want to get into some of the other news, but we got some folks on hold as well and want to get some phone calls. And I want to begin with Jimmy calling. Jimmy, welcome.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate your show and the fact that you give us a Georgia perspective as well.
Thank you.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, what's going on?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick. Yeah, I wanted to make a quick comment. That you were talking about, the good that Trump has done as far as all the jobs he created, and that the liberal, progressive side of the aisle can't seem to acknowledge that. And I think the reason for that is because he created the wrong kind of jobs.
You mean he created good-paying American jobs?
Instead of green jobs that would require us to import more rare earth materials from China.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, that is one of the outrages of the left is that we became energy independent under the Trump administration, where we manufactured enough oil from North Dakota and the like and Montana that we didn't have to import oil. We were a net exporter of oil for the first time in a very long time, and they actually consider that a bad thing. You're absolutely right about that. The jobs that Donald Trump created in this country, the manufacturing jobs, the industrial jobs, are the jobs that the left says are bad for the environment. Never mind that they're good-paying jobs. They're bad for the environment. This is part of the scam foisted by the left. And it is a scam in the way it is talked about. Consider solar panels or batteries. Now, if all of us drove battery-powered cars, if we all had a Tesla, not that Tesla could manufacture enough. The more I learn about Tesla, the more I want to avoid that stock. But let's just say everybody had a Tesla. Well, you would need more power plants. And let's say you use solar power plants. Well, the solar power manufacturers, it's a deeply environmentally messy task to make those solar panels. I mean, the solar panels, contrary to what the left may have you believe, solar panels are not manufactured by smearing unicorn poop on a piece of plywood. You actually have to go to third world countries and get rare earth minerals from mines that pollute. Oftentimes, child labor is used in these places. They don't want to talk about that. Oftentimes, China has bought up the rights, so we're actually buying from and funding China. It's one thing China has done that the Trump administration tried to push back against is around the world they started buying up the mines for rare earth minerals. American companies were beat to the punch by China, which would overpay to shut us out so that they control the supply of rare earth minerals and the manufacturing of those things that are needed for solar panels or even for wind turbines. The materials used in wind turbines. It's not like the left would have you believe that, we can pour all these resources into destroying the local environment of third world countries so that we in the West can feel good and do better. God forbid Africa ever decide to add air conditioners to people's homes. The left would have an absolute coronary if refrigeration and industrialization took off in Africa, which is a massive continent. There's a grand disconnect in this, and there's also there's something else here. I think it is worth saying and is true, and occasionally in certain circles of the internet you get it. Is a part of environmentalism is you reduce the car footprint, reduce the carbon footprint for the car footprint. You reduce the size of a family because families aren't going to get a 15-passenger van. They're just going to have 1.3 kids instead of 2.5 kids. Reduce the family size. Environmentalism has incentivized smaller families, and smaller families are actually long-term bad. The bigger the family you can have, the better. Now, there are people who can't. I am in one of those situations. We have 2 children. We can't have any more kids. But I know friends who have 6. I've got a friend who has 13 kids. Good for them. The oldest help with the youngest. cheaper by the dozen, as they say. Now, a lot of people are appalled by the idea of having that many kids. I don't know that I can handle it. I don't know if I've got the temperament for it, but they do. They got 13 loving children. And they're a massive family. I've got friends with 5 kids. Probably handle 5 kids. But environmentalism thinks that's bad. The environmentalists think it's bad to have a big family. Actually, a big family keeps you off the social safety net where you help each other. But, you miss all of this. Now everybody just wants just one kid to be burdened with both parents when they get old. At least have 2, if you can. Have 2. But environmentalism favors small families or no families. Environmentalism favors environmentally messy jobs so that we can virtue signal in the West. Environmentalism favors destroying African child labor forces in mines to get rare earth minerals so that we can sleep well at night with our solar panels on our roofs. There's a dark secret to environmentalism that they don't like to talk about. And that's the reality, but God forbid we say anything about it. Now, let's go back to the phones. Mel is calling. Mel, welcome to the program. Well, Mel, sorry, I pushed the button and then I didn't push the button. Sorry, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Thanks for taking my call. And this is kind of along the lines of Jimmy's comment, your previous caller.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a thought I had about documenting the good things that President Trump's administration did over the last 4 years. And that was in newspapers in small-town America. The Trump supporters of the local Republican Party or whoever take out half-page ads and just list 5 or 6 bullet items that he did, so that this would be documented, especially if that newspaper is the legal organ. It's documented in the courthouse for generations to come. And I say that because, let's face it, the left is infiltrated and by and large controls academia. But someday historians may research it and there'll be a voice, that's documented things that they could have as a reference. What are your thoughts?
Look, Mel, I actually think that's not a bad idea. And frankly, I know a lot of local newspaper publishers. Will Davis up in Monroe County, I bet with Monroe County Reporter, would love for people to take out ads in his newspaper documenting the successful things the president did and record them for posterity's sake. I actually think that what we're going to see for the next 4 years, much like a cultural revolution in communist countries, is the left purging any notion that Donald Trump did anything good, anything Donald Trump, and we already see this. The rhetoric now coming from the left. If you support any policy that Donald Trump supported, you are bad. Tax cuts are now racist because Donald Trump supports tax cuts. A wall along the border with Mexico has nothing to do with national security now. It's just racism. If you support the Keystone XL pipeline, it's environmental racism. If you support a robust anti-Iran foreign policy, well, you know what? You're an Islamophobe. If you support strong policies and ties with Israel, well, you know what? Now you're bigoted against the Palestinians. This is what's going to happen over the next 4 years. Anything that Donald Trump supported, the media is going to retroactively define as bad, even though it is. I mean, if we're honest about it, much of the policy we got from Donald Trump is policy we could have gotten from a George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush or a Mitt Romney or a John McCain. The rhetoric and behavior of the president notwithstanding his policies, the policies of the Trump administration, by and large, not in all cases, but in many cases, were pretty standard fare for a Republican administration. And now the left will take what happened on January 6th with the storming of the Capitol. And if you support tax cuts, you support storming the Capitol, and you're a racist. That's absolutely going to happen, and we're watching it in real time right now as they call for unity and disparage anybody who disagrees with Joe Biden's policies. Now I want to get to what I wanted to talk about. This was my topic for now. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? because I get to manage the clock here. This is called my floating break. I'm going to take a commercial timeout right now. Why? Because I have something I want to talk about. But you can call too if you want. The phone number is 877-97-ERICK, E-R-I-C-K, or 877-973-7425, 877-973-7425.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERICK, 877-973-7425. Let me talk about this. The president has, over the last week or two, the former president, Donald Trump, last week spent a lot of time talking about forming a new party. Essentially let the Republican establishment have the GOP, and he will form a new party. Okay. There's a problem, and I've been asked a lot about this. The problem is forming a third party actually takes a lot of resources, and the president would have to devote a lot of his personal money to it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, look at Ross Perot. Ross Perot formed the Reform Party, which I think there are remnants of the Reform Party around now still. Let's see. Checking Wikipedia. I know, but still. The Reform Party of the United States of America, generally known as the Reform Party USA, is a political party founded in 1995 by Ross Perot. The party has nominated candidates over the years, including Pat Buchanan and Ralph Nader. Most significant victory came when Jesse Ventura won governor of Minnesota in 98, although he left the party in the midst of his term. It looks like it's 6,666 people. Lots of 6666 according to Wikipedia. In 2020, it looks like who did they nominate in 2020? Rocky De La Fuente and Darcy Richardson. I got nothing. So I don't know who this Rocky De La Fuente person is. He's an American businessman, a perennial candidate. Self-created American Delta Party. Latched himself onto the Reform Party, the Alliance Party, the American Independent Party. See, this is the problem. Third parties in this country, it is very difficult. The Republicans and Democrats may disagree on everything, but they work very hard together on ballot access. So, for example, in many states, to get on a ballot as a third party, you have to collect a percentage of signatures equal to the number of people in a congressional district. It has to be done by people by county, of people who live in those counties. Collecting signatures of people who live in those counties can only be done at certain times on certain forms. It must be done certain ways. It is ridiculously difficult to do. Now, if anyone could do it, Donald Trump could do it, given the loyalty of his base of support. You'd have a lot of people out there doing signature collection, but then you would have Republican lawyers in particular ruthlessly picking apart those signatures and casting down on those signatures. So, for example, you get someone to sign up. You have to verify that the person who did the signature collection was unpaid volunteer, who lived in the county where the signatures were collected, and that the person who signed it is actually a registered voter in that county. If they're not a registered voter in that county, well, then you got a problem. And that's how difficult it is. It is a huge burden to be able to start a third party in this country. And then you have to get a certain percentage of the vote to be able to get permanent ballot access. And so take the Reform Party, for example. The Reform Party does not have ballot access in every state. And that, in and of itself, becomes a problem. And then there's the high watermark for candidacies. I mean, take, for example, the presidency. The high watermark for the Reform Party came in 1996 when Ross Perot got, 13 to 15% of the vote? It is very difficult to do. And it has to be sustained over time. And the history of third parties shows that a third party that is built on one man's cult of personality, the party tends to collapse thereafter. It happened with Ross Perot. Ross Perot built a cult of personality and built a party on it. And when Ross Perot stepped away, the party collapsed. It is very hard. The Reform Party maintains chapters in Texas, California, New Jersey, Florida, North Carolina, New York. That's it. So good luck trying to form a third party. On top of that, you'll have the Republican Party out to get you. Yeah, you may even have the Democratic Party in some cases out to get you, although I would suspect the Democrats would help you just because the Democrats would want to hurt the Republicans. And then there's the cable news network aspect of it. What about starting a cable news network? Well, you don't want to buy into OAN because they're about to go bankrupt when Dominion Voter Services sues them. OAN is scrubbing its website of any story about Dominion Voter Systems. I'll get into this in a little bit. and they're going to get sued. So you don't want them. Newsmax may get sued, but that's Chris Ruddy. So you're not going to. Chris Ruddy, I'm sure, would love for the president to be there. I'm sure Fox News would love to give the president a show. A loyal boost there. But if the president wants the Trump network, how is he going to get cable access? Comcast does not have to allow the Trump News Network access to their cable lines. If you're a cable news network, you don't have to put them on. So Cox Communications is my internet service provider. You got AT&T. AT&T owns CNN. Why would AT&T want to give the Trump News Network a platform on AT&T's internet broadband so that they can attack CNN? They've already got Fox News. It's well established. What about let's see, Charter? Maybe Charter would do it. I doubt it. See, this is the problem. Cable access. So you start as a streaming service. You've got to grow as a streaming service, and then maybe you'll get the Dish Network to put you on their satellite. Dish Network tends to go first with a lot of this stuff. Well, then if you can get traction there, then maybe DirecTV through AT&T will put you on. Maybe. But it takes time. It takes money. It takes resources. And your first 5 years are money-losing years because you're paying a lot of talent and you're marketing the hell out of your station so that people know they got to get a streaming service. And then will Apple let it on the Apple TV? Will Roku let it on the Roku? All these sorts of things. And so you spend 5-6 years losing money. Fox News was a money-losing venture for News Corp for years before it took off. You got to commit time. You got to commit money. Does the president want to commit time and money to building a party? Does he want to commit time and money to building a news network? Or does he just want a show? Give the president a show on HLN, and he totally revitalizes HLN. I mean, there are options here, and frankly, the president has an audience. I think there are existing networks that would love to give President Trump a show. But then does President Trump want to do a 5-night-a-week TV show? Or does he want to do a weekend show? Maybe he'll do a weekend show on Fox or Newsmax. Maybe. Maybe on CNN. Who knows? But committing the time to build a new party is really difficult, and it takes a lot of money. Ross Perot spent about $1 billion of his own money to build it up, and then it becomes difficult, too, because then once you're legitimized, then you run into FEC rules about fundraising. You can only give $25,000 a year to a political party. So you formed your political party, and now it's starved for cash, and you can't give it money. You got to do an outside group to help it. These are the real-world problems you run into trying to build a new party and a new TV network. They're problems that maybe the president, given his support, can overcome, but they're still real problems. There's just not an easy path forward. The president needs a platform. President Trump needs a platform if he wants to somehow get back in the game. He doesn't have Twitter. He doesn't have Facebook. He doesn't have YouTube. He doesn't have Instagram. Where's he going to go? He could get a TV show. He could do all sorts of things moving forward. But he probably needs to sit it out for a few months and let things cool down first. Howdy, welcome. It's Erick Erickson. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I had something I wanted to talk about, and I totally forgot what it was. This is me with dad brain. So honest to goodness, I was in the midst of talking in the last half hour about the third party problems and the like, and something popped into my head of, I should comment on this, and then it just, I know what it was. I know what it was now. On CNN yesterday, they covered Biden's presidential limo headed to Arlington National Cemetery. How many people didn't know the agenda yesterday? It's all they're taking Joe Biden to Arlington already? I mean, he's only been president for 6 hours. Man, Kamala works fast. I'm sorry. I know Democrats are appalled. I can't believe you just said that. But y'all are all thinking it. I mean, I get this every day. How many roller skates are going to be on the steps at the White House when Joe Biden comes down for work? The memes are the Bernie Sanders memes that are out there of Bernie wearing his mask with his arms crossed, taking social distancing to new levels is fantastic. My goodness. All right. There's a piece I want to talk about that Yuval Levin has written, one of the insightful thinkers of our age. And I want to spend a little bit of time here. I'm going to read you some of this. And I think this is fascinating, and it's worth reading. The headline is "The Case for Wooden Pews." The case for wooden pews. We are living in an era of unprecedented doubt. While belief in God remains high, public confidence in religious institutions is at its lowest since routine polling on the question began. In 1975, Gallup found that nearly 70% of Americans expressed either a great deal or quite a lot of trust in organized religion. By last year, that figure stood at just 42%. Regular church attendance is also near a modern nadir. Even before COVID-19, the Pew Research Center found that a percentage of Americans who report attending a religious service at least once a month fell over the last decade from 52% to about 42%. Of course, not everything is trending downward. For example, the percentage of highly religious Americans, according to a 2017 study from sociologists at Harvard and Indiana University, has remained relatively constant. And the most religious in America appear to be engaged in their faith with continued intensity. Speaking to the Washington Post, one of the researchers compared this phenomenon to a container getting smaller but more concentrated. So what's happening with religion in America? The answer, at least in part, may have to do with how different faith communities have reacted to this crisis of trust in organized religion. Some leaders in institutions have responded by making their religious orders less demanding and therefore they hope more appealing. By emphasizing broad commitments to justice and de-emphasizing specific strictures on personal behavior, they hope to draw more people to church and ultimately into faith. On some level, this seems intuitive. Softer pews might make people more comfortable in the congregation. The logic of such a response is not hard to understand. The demands of traditional religion seem at odds with the spirit of the age. Potential parishioners, particularly younger ones, are opting for a culture of choice and expression over one of faith and obedience. So the thinking goes, closing the distance between the two can draw them in. The broken state of our society seems to lend support for that logic. Our crisis of isolation, division, and cultural conflict is in many respects a crisis of meaning. The loss may be the result of a religious hunger left unsated by a society without a traditional vocabulary of sin and redemption. The very forms of our conflicts over race, sexuality, and the meaning of our history are an indication of such hunger. We need only witness the accusations of wickedness, calls for redemptive deliverance, persecutions of heretics, and demands for purification. The great awakening, sweeping some of our elite institutions hints at an opening, showing younger Americans that our country's religious traditions stand for social justice too, as they surely do, might help clear the path to such an awakening. But this logic mistakes the character of the crisis American religion now confronts. It is not exactly a crisis of belief in the teachings of traditional religion, but rather a crisis of confidence in the institutions that claim to embody them. In other words, Americans aren't losing their faith in God. 87% of the public expressed belief in God last year in Gallup's figures, which is roughly the level pollsters have found for many decades. What Americans do have trouble believing, however, is that our institutions, our churches, seminaries, religious schools, and charities remain capable of forming trustworthy people who actually exhibit the integrity they preach. To overcome such doubts and to appeal to persuadable younger Americans, our religious institutions need to show not that they are continuous with the larger culture, but that they are capable of addressing its deficiencies, that they can speak with legitimate authority and be counted on to do the work of molding souls and shaping character. The problem, in other words, may be that our pews have grown too soft, not too hard. And he goes on from there in a more lengthy discussion of what's going on in churches. I would commend to you, if you can find it, Yuval Levin's piece. The title is The Case for Wooden Pews. Essentially, that we need a religious institution in this country, religious institutions. We need our local churches not to reflect the culture around them to be accessible to people, but to seem somewhat, if you will, and I don't want to mischaracterize him here, but to be a little mysterious and a little bit addressing the deficiencies of culture. So my silence, let me explain it after saying that, is I have something that I say occasionally, and I always hesitate when I say it. Do I sound like a broken record? Have I said this too much? Are people tuning me out for saying this? But with a devil may care attitude, what the heck? Every person, every single person, every person who has ever lived, every person alive right now, every person who will live in the future, every person has a voice somewhere in the back of their head, in the dark recesses of their mind, and it asks, it whispers a very basic question. Is this all there is? Is this all there is? Is it? Do we live in an unjust, unfair world? We grow up, maybe. We have a good life or a bad life, an unfair life, an unkind life, a cruel life, a nice life, a good life, a rich life, a poor life. And then we die and the worms eat our body. And that's it. Is there something more? That little voice in the back of your head, it asks a question, but the question is loaded with the suggestion that maybe there is more. Atheists spend an inordinate amount of time suppressing that voice. Because everybody has that voice. Everybody has that voice. I have friends. They are friends. They are atheists. Their son is in seminary. They are atheists. They raise their children out of the church. They don't believe in God. Their son is not just in seminary, but in a conservative reform seminary. And he is upset, mournfully so, that his parents will cross into eternity on the wrong side. They didn't raise him. with a sense of religion or purpose. If anything, that they scoffed at it, and yet he heard that little voice. The voice his parents, too, had and turned bitter towards it until they silenced it, and he heard the voice, and he thought maybe there is more. And he grew up an atheist. He grew up a hedonist. And was impacted in college by a girl, no less, who is not his wife, was just a friend, and thought she lives in a way that my family doesn't live. And he liked the way she lived, and she had answers to questions. To the question, is there more than this? All of us in society and woke culture, social justice warriors, we're all in search of a heaven. We all hear the question in our head and we wonder, is there more? And the woke culturalists out there, the progressives, have decided that they will bring heaven to earth. There is no God and there is no sin, but they use the language of sin and redemption and just no language of grace in woke culture. And they try to answer the question in the back of people's heads, and they try to answer it in a way that brings heaven to earth. This is all there is, and we're going to make the best of it we can. And then there are those who Yuval Levin addresses in this piece on the case for hard religion. There are those who try to accommodate society, and in accommodating society, they blend society and the countercultural influence of the church in a way that is off-putting to some and makes for a weak faith that people can drift away from because they really aren't answering the question. And then along come those in the hard religion. Those in a religion that stands out from the culture, that addresses the problems of the culture, that takes care of their own and also seeks to go out into society and help others. This again from Yuval Levin. Observers of modern democracy since Alexis de Tocqueville have noted that in free societies, it is precisely the moral and religious institutions that hold firm to orthodoxy and not those that seek modernization and accommodation, which have proven most attractive, thanks in no small part to their countercultural character. In our time, no less than any other, traditionalists should live out their faiths and their way in the world, confident that their instruction and example will make the world better and that people will be drawn to the spark. In an era of declining confidence in mass institutions, we are more than ever in need of institutions of interpersonal moral formation. Both the libertarian and the progressive ideals of freedom assume a human person already fully formed, requiring only liberation from oppression of various sorts to be free. But our traditions have always opposed this vision with a more skeptical view, which assumes that the human person is imperfect and unformed, perhaps even fallen. This other ideal comes loaded with low expectations of the individual, but it therefore demands a lot of our institutions. It assumes that each of us is born deficient but capable of moral improvement, which happens soul by soul, guided by pro-social communities. This process cannot be entirely circumvented by social or political transformation. Building individual character and virtue, then, is the foremost work of every generation. To fail to engage in it is to regress to barbarism, and to engage in it is our highest purpose. In different terms, by different means, this is what all our traditional religions teach. It is by advancing this idea that we can best meet the rising generation's hunger for meaning and truth. But a recovery of trust in our religious institutions first requires a recovery of confidence on their part as well. Put a different way, our ability to pass along the teachings of the great faith traditions to another generation and to sustain the preconditions for a free society demands the kind of pews that help us sit up straight. Religious orthodoxy matters. Biblical sexual ethic matters. It matters in a way to my atheist friend's son, who lived a hedonistic lifestyle, sleeping around in high school, no consequence for sin because there was no sin. Drugs, alcohol, girls. And then to go to college and befriend a girl who he just wanted to get in bed with, just like all the others from high school and into college, who said no. Who embraced a biblical sexual ethic. something he was completely unfamiliar with, had ridiculed in the past. And here's someone he struck up a friendship with that he wanted to become a sexual friendship, and just like other friends of his. And she said no. She lived a life in a way that struck him, that called to the voice in the back of his head that said, is there something more than this? Surely there must be something more than this. The voice his parents had suppressed, the voice he had in the back of his head to which they gave no answers, this girl gave answers too. And in a society where people are burning down businesses across America, even now, that Joe Biden is president, he's not progressive enough for these people. This is a society into which the church can and should address. And it addresses it by looking different from everything else. And there are so many churches out there where they don't look different, where you show up on Sunday and that's it. There are a couple of church communities in Macon now where you get into this, you're in part of a community. These people become the people you're with all the time. There are a lot of churches where you see the people on Sunday, if at all, maybe on a live stream, and that's it. And in some of these churches that are drawing people in, some of the fastest growing churches in the nation, frankly, are accused of cult-like behavior, not because they're cults, but because when you come into that community of believers, that's your community. It's very much like Mormonism to the degree of Mormonism. There is a community of believers within Mormonism, and they are distinct from the culture around them. They look different, they behave different, they act different, and so many church communities look and sound just like everybody else. There's no reason to be drawn into them. Why go to this place on a Sunday when I can go to a bar? They're not giving me anything that the bar's just giving me general fellowship too. There's something to be said in the present age for conservatives, particularly Orthodox Christian conservatives, to look and sound different from everyone else, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually their strength.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I gotta laugh a little bit here. The great, terrible blight on humanity now is how much environmental damage is the COVID vaccine doing. How much terrible environmental damage from the COVID vaccine. Because, they're having to fly it around. They're having to fly it. It's so this, this translates perfectly into the prior conversation on on religion in the public square, so to speak, and people needing hard religion right now. That the biggest competitor to Christianity right now is not Islam, and it's not even really pure secularism. It's environmentalism. Environmentalism, the religion, it has sacraments. It has behavioral restrictions. It has ceremony. It has religious services. It has tithing. All of these things come within the secular religion. And this offshoot of this denomination of secularism, environmentalism. And now they're fretful that if you take the COVID vaccine, are you harming Mother Earth? Because wasn't COVID Mother Earth reacting? Wasn't COVID Mother Earth doing something to humanity to teach us a lesson? And now our response is mass manufacture of a vaccine and flying it around on polluting airplanes and keeping it in cold storage that runs up energy costs. Y'all think I'm making this up? No, this is an actual real worry out there. This is people are incensed by this, which is, I mean, you can laugh, I can laugh, we can all laugh at this, but come on, people, really? I mean, the reality is that it is a miracle of modern science. It is a miracle of modern science that they were able, with the help of a supercomputer, to come up with the ability to fight this virus within 48 hours. And all of this time in manufacturing the vaccine, it has been testing and manufacturing and figuring out the distribution chains. And by the way, I've got an answer for those who say, well, we haven't tested enough. How do we know? Everybody I've talked to has said the real issue here is that normally it takes we do a couple thousand people at a time, and we get up to 30,000 people over several years of testing people with the vaccine. We had enough people volunteer to test the vaccine that we know the vaccine works. We tested it in a record amount of time because we had a record number of people volunteering to test it.
15.
Which gives me encouragement. Thankfully, my wife has gotten her first round. Now I'm ready to get mine. Gentlemen, welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. So glad to have you with me today. Feel free to call in, 877-973-7425. Yeah, I know I already gave the number. Giving it again. This is difficult, what I want to talk about. I am, it's occasional, because I criticize my own side and try to hold my own side accountable. Oftentimes I get progressives who follow me, and then they realize what I actually believe, and they send me really the angriest emails. They feel so betrayed. Oh, here's this guy telling me what I want to hear, who claims to be someone who supported the president, but oh my gosh, he actually did. And oh my gosh, he actually is pro-life, and oh my gosh, he actually is Christian, and I can't. This is horrible. I've been duped. No, I am who I am, and I have always taken the position that regarding my side of the aisle, that we've got to be intellectually honest, and we've got to hold our own side accountable. If we don't hold our own side accountable, the other side will. It is why back in 2006, 2008, when Fred Thompson was running for president, I got to be friends with him and his wife, and one of the things I urged Fred Thompson to do that I wish he had done, and he didn't feel comfortable doing it for a variety of reasons, but it was really to make an entire case for going after corruption within the Republican Party. Something that John McCain claimed to do but never really did. Fred should have done it. Somebody should have done it. I mean, it was when I was writing at Red State in 2006, I wrote repeatedly that if the Republican Party did not clean up its own side of the aisle, the voters would do it. And sure enough, they did, for a variety of reasons, not just the corruption, but just amplified all the other concerns about the GOP in 2006 with George Bush and the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and the like, was amplified by all these Republican congressmen getting carted off to jail. Some of whom, by the way, Donald Trump just pardoned some of the corruption within the Republican Party. And I've always just believed that if we don't hold our own side accountable, the other side will. And it puts me at odds sometimes. I've got a great friend of mine who one time sent me a note. Y'all would all know who this person is, and said, who do you think you are? You act like you're the enforcer of conservatism. Who gave you that right? And my response was that I think we all have an obligation out of intellectual honesty to be enforcers of conservatism. And you and I may not always agree on what conservatism is, what is conservative policy or not, but by and large, we should be able to recognize that intellectually, honestly, at a foundation, it is free from corruption, free from grift, and free from lies. It should be premised on truth and honesty. We should have integrity within the conservative movement. I myself am a Christian conservative. I believe there's an objective truth because I believe there's a God. If there is objectively a God, then there must objectively be truth. It can't just be your truth and my truth. When you say your truth and my truth, and what you're actually saying is feelings. And unfortunately, so much of the conservative movement has been consumed with emotion, passion. It's not really about truth anymore. It's let's own the left. It makes me happy to see them miserable. What can I do to make them miserable? As opposed to what policy can I advance to improve the world? And so I think there's got to be some level of intellectual honesty within conservatism, and it's got to be truth-based. It's got to be fact-based. It's got to be reality-based. And it gets me in trouble with my own side sometimes because I'm willing to call it my own side and not just own the left. I don't want to own the left. I don't want to behave like the left. I don't want to engage in the behaviors of the left because I'm not of the left. I reject the insinuation that conservatives have to, in order to win, behave like the left. In fact, I think that people who behave like the left got beat on Election Day, including President Trump. President Trump behaved like the left-wing anarchists out there to a degree. His picking fights all the time, in your face all the time, no grace. People got tired of it. Just like they did with the Democratic candidates who were in your face and wanted to show up and harass people in restaurants and stuff. President Trump was a bully, and they were a bully, and they all got rejected by the public. But there was no theft. So I hesitate saying what I'm about to say, and that's a long way of grimacing. I know I'm going to make some people mad, even some friends of mine mad when I say this. But I think for the health and well-being of conservatism in this country and of the Republican Party, there's got to be a reckoning for what's happened these last few months. And I know when I say that, there are those who will portray me as taking the position of the John Brennans of the world or whatever, that we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission or re-education. And that's not where I'm going with this. I don't think that people in the media, I don't think the left, I don't think reporters, I don't think the mainstream media has any say in this. I think this has to be an internal thing, a reckoning for the conservative movement. And I'm probably the one that gets thrown out. Because so many people have bought the lies. There's got to be a reckoning for QAnon. They need to be exposed. They need to be hunted and exposed as to who these anonymous people actually were. I, for the longest time, was dismissive of QAnon, as some of you are undoubtedly. It was trumped up by the media, amplified by the media, made bigger than it is by the media, and yet I know someone who filled up their bathtub full of water, convinced that the power was going out this week in a military coup. My sister, next door neighbor, came over very concerned, telling all the neighbors that she has a friend who is friends with Donald Trump Jr., and there's going to be a military coup because the election was stolen and Donald Trump was going to stay in power, but the banks and the power is going out, so stockpile your cash, stockpile your food, enough for 2 weeks while this all gets sorted out, and victory comes to Donald Trump. We've had people call this program and my evening program asking about, was the Pope arrested? There are pastors in this country who from the pulpit have pronounced that God has spoken to them that Donald Trump was staying in power. The number of you who have reached out to me because you have members of your family or friends who believe this stuff is staggering. I thought it was a fringe, and I'd like to still tell myself it's a fringe, and many of you still tell yourselves it's a fringe, but the reality is there are way more people who believe this stuff than should. The number of people who really believe that Donald Trump was going to be inaugurated yesterday. I know someone who I have long considered a friend who is mad at me because I do not believe any of this stuff. And his awakening came when the Supreme Court did not side with Donald Trump, because for several years the QAnon people have been saying, Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, they're going to be there with Clarence Thomas and Alito, and they're going to side with Trump on this stuff, and they're going to hand him the election. How many of you were told that the Supreme Court was going to throw out the election? How many of you believe the election was stolen? Most of you do believe the election was stolen, and it wasn't. And you're mad at me for telling you it wasn't, and you think I'm believing the lie. But I've read through the 60-some-odd complaints filed by the Trump campaign, and none of them ever alleged a stolen election. None of them ever alleged voter fraud. Sidney Powell in her Kraken lawsuit, she herself dismissed that lawsuit. It wasn't thrown out by a Democratic judge. It was thrown out by Sidney Powell herself. There's got to be a reckoning for this sort of crap in the Republican Party, and in the conservative movement in particular. There's got to be an accounting for the people who believe the QAnon stuff and spread it. There's got to be an accounting for the people who believe the Supreme Court was really going to side with Donald Trump and throw out the election and hand it to him, or have a do-over election. there's got to be an accounting for the people who sold those lies to so many good people. There doesn't need to be an accounting for the people who believe it. There's got to be an accounting for the people who knew better and spread it. There's got to be an accounting for those who believed that the state legislatures of the country should throw out the Electoral College in these states. Because when the Democrats do it, they're going to have done it because they were inspired by conservatives, and these conservatives will have ceded the high ground. There's got to be an accounting for this stuff. And I know I probably find myself on the outside. I never intended to be a conservative radio show host. I never intended to do what I'm doing for a living. And now that I'm doing it, I can't conceive of doing anything else. I love it. But I have to tell you, for the last several months, I've come into work, sat down behind this microphone on a daily basis, and thought, is today the day that I burn all my bridges and destroy my career? Is today the day that I make my natural audience mad? Because I've lived in this world where if I criticize the president, I get all sorts of praise from the left and the media, but they will swiftly condemn me the moment I point out boys can't become girls. Because I'm not of them, and I increasingly feel alienated from a political party and a conservative movement that I've long been a part of and have so many friends in, and it's just dismaying to me to see the people who bought the QAnon lies, who bought the Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell lies, who bought the lies about Dominion voter systems, who bought the lies about these machines stealing votes. It dismays me to hear so many people call this show fretful that the Democrats are stealing it. It dismays me to see the number of Republicans in Georgia who sat home in January because the chairman of the Republican Party in Georgia, the congresswoman from Northwest Georgia, the president of the United States, and so many others ruthlessly undermined trust and faith and confidence in the election, when in fact the election was not stolen. And I sit down every day, gosh, if I point this out, am I going to just destroy my career? Because I'm telling the truth, and so many people want the lie to be true, and they think my truth, the truth, is the actual lie. The number of people I encounter on social media who tell me that it was Antifa who stormed last week. Look at this video from this fringe website. It proves it. It proves it was Antifa. Pay no attention to the 200 people who have been arrested and what they've been saying on social media for 4 years. Pay no attention to all the Trump supporters who were there, the known Trump supporters who were inside the Capitol. Pay no attention to them. There's got to be a reckoning for the lies, because a conservative movement that is built on a house of lies is a conservative movement that can't get back into power. A conservative movement that lies to its own voters sows distrust so that people won't believe us again. We have all of these stories, the boy who cried wolf, these lessons about lying and honesty and integrity. And when I point this stuff out, when I point out we've got to, within the conservative movement, have a reckoning, a cleaning of the house, an accounting of who spread the lies and why did they do it? Were they whipped up into the moment? Did they know better? Did they actually believe it? I get who do you think you are? You're a nobody from nowhere. I'm perfectly fine to be a nobody from nowhere, but I'm also perfectly fine to believe in the truth. The conservative movement that I have always been a part of is not about the acquisition of power. And you hear this now from people who used to be parts of the conservative movement. Was the conservative movement conserved? It's all about the acquisition of power now. But power without principle is power that will be abused. And power without principle, without an intellectual framework to get anything done, is the power that's going to be wasted. There's got to be a reckoning for QAnon. There's got to be exposure. There's got to be an accounting. The number of people I've encountered who got scared, who believed this stuff, who heard the rumors, who withdrew money from bank accounts, who filled up bathtubs full of water, who stockpiled food. It's not a fringe number of people. There's got to be a reckoning for that. There's got to be a reckoning for the people who sow distrust into our system of government. There's got to be a reckoning, but it can't come from the media. It can't come from the left. It can't come from politicians. It's got to be conservatives themselves who are willing to stand up and say, you know what, truth and fact first. It won't be taken seriously. The media wants to do this because the media wants to silence conservatives. The media would love the opportunity to shut us down. The media would love the opportunity to bankrupt the conservative movement. You already see them, on behalf of the left, going after corporate donors to conservative institutions. You already see them moving the goalposts where anything the president supported is de facto racist, no matter how sound the policy, including tax cuts. There's got to be an accounting, though, from inside the conservative movement for some of this stuff, because people believe this stuff. People bought into this stuff. People stole this stuff. This is insanity to me. And now the number of people who want to dismiss it and say, "Oh, it's no big deal. Only a fringe people believe it. Only a few people believe it. You're growing it out of disproportion. I don't know anybody who believes this stuff." Well, then you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention. The conservative movement has got to do better, because I believe conservatism, believe in limited government. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe in a pro-life agenda. But it's real hard to sell the American people on this stuff when they see the bat crap crazy antics that have gone on within the conservative movement as a whole. Truth has to matter.
There's not my truth or your truth. There is only
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. So John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock have been sworn in. Ossoff will be the senior senator for Georgia. I don't know why I don't know if they went in alphabetical order or what. I mean, Ossoff only has a 2-year term, so I guess Ossoff should technically be the senior senator. But man, we got to put up with that guy for 6 years. Warnock, though, who's the GOP going to run against him? Now, one of the questions here is what's going to happen with agriculture in Georgia? Because Warnock and Ossoff are both Metro Atlanta candidates. Ossoff has problems outside the metro area. What's going to happen with agriculture in the state? It's still the number one industry in the state. But you now got who is the chair of the House Ag Committee for the Democrats. Now, hang on a second. I gotta get the actual name. House Agriculture Committee. The chair of the Agriculture Committee. Oh, it's David Scott, who is from Georgia, which is good for Georgia, I guess. But he's, well, a lot of people in the ag industry, they're like, oh, why do we have a guy who represents the Atlanta area? You know, Robert Dickey in the State House here in Georgia, he's going to be the chairman of the ag committee in the Georgia State House, which is fantastic, given his background, Dickey Farms. But we're going to have to deal with this. Say what you will about David Perdue. I thought he was a great guy, and he was from Middle Georgia, and his cousin, Sonny Perdue, was the Secretary of Agriculture. Having been governor of Georgia, they get agriculture in the state. You had Stacey Abrams being dismissive of it on the campaign trail in 2018, which arguably had some impact on her ability to run for office. It's going to be an issue to deal with, and who is the Republican Party going to use to run against Warnock in 2 years? I mean, who do y'all want? I'm actually interested. Is there somebody out there? I've heard people float. Where's Dylan Glenn at? Dylan who? Most people responded. Who is best to run against Warnock in 2 years? Is it a reboot of Kelly Loeffler of who she actually is? I don't think that's going to fly. Is it David Perdue? I don't know. Is it Sonny Perdue? I don't know.
30.
Who runs against Warnock in 2 years? Who does the GOP have? Arguably a deeper bench than the Democrats, but a whole lot of insane, crazy people right now, too, like Georgia's own Maxine Waters, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who some people are trying to push to run. That would just ensure, 6 more years of Warnock if we did that. At least we got a competitive chance if we play our cards right. Hi there, it's Erick Erickson here. The phone number, 404-8, nope, wrong number. That's the evening show, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I gotta make a coffee mug to sell for this program that just has my quote, "People are stupid" on it. There have been requests. I need to do that. Okay. I want to let's here at the end, the last 30 minutes of this program, let's consider this Warnock Senate seat. The Republicans in Georgia are going to need to put forward a good candidate, one who can help Brian Kemp and also help him or herself. Who should it be? I would submit to you that the Maxine Waters of Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is not the choice. She's a QAnon conspiracy theorist who believed 9/11 was an inside job. The children killed in that school was a false flag, and all the other QAnon nonsense that's out there. If you think that she's going to get a majority of the vote in Georgia, you might as well go on and write a check to Raphael Warnock for his next 6 years. So who could it be? I don't know that Kelly Loeffler could do it, given the campaign she ran. I think if she would run a different campaign this time, and it would be remarkably different. What about Doug Collins? There will be some Republicans who blame him for Kelly Loeffler losing, but Doug's a popular guy. He couldn't beat Loeffler in that race, but then he didn't have her money. That would be an interesting contrast for Doug to do it. He's an option. Who else would be out there? I don't think Karen Handel is going to run again. I'm not sure who out there would be a compelling candidate. Maybe we can get Herschel Walker to come back. I know there are some who want Vernon Jones to do it. I don't know that Vernon Jones is capable of running a statewide campaign against Warnock. I don't think he can lock in all the Republican base. This is the problem the Republicans have in Georgia. They are a deep bench, but who wants to do it? Nope, not me. Nope. Are y'all crazy? Y'all want my wife to? In all honesty, and I'm not making this up, my wife keeps a bag of Quikrete in the garage that if I ever run for office again, I'm getting buried in the backyard. Y'all will know when we get beautiful roses in the backyard. Y'all will know where I am. I ran for office once. I won. It was the worst job I ever had. My buddy Seth Clark, he's on the county commission in Bibb County, and I warned him. Now he's a Democrat, and I warned him. I said, man, you don't understand that there are not partisan positions on a county commission. There is crazy and not crazy, and he is having to figure that out. Local politics, by the way, local politics is nasty. Local politics is nasty business. Because everybody knows you. You're in a small area, and people run into you at the grocery store. I one time had a guy run into me at the grocery store who was mad at me because his garbage had not been picked up. Now, ironically, if you're one of my county commissioners, I've complained to you because my garbage hasn't been picked up. The difference is I rolled my trash can down. It's just they only picked up one. They wouldn't pick up 2 canisters. They'd changed the rules, and I didn't know about it. Now I got to pay for two trash cans. But this guy, he hadn't bothered to roll his trash can down, and he couldn't understand why they would not come back by and pick it up. I had a guy who lived across the street from me at my old house. He was a great neighbor for a long time until he just got broken by politics. I mean, really just broken by politics. And he would heckle me if I was in the front yard with my kids. And one day he came to me. I had pinned a piece in the local paper in Macon about turning the Sports Hall of Fame building into a new courthouse, making it a new courthouse. They were moving the Sports Hall of Fame building, or I guess it was actually at the time they were Music Hall of Fame building. They were moving it, one of the two. And anyway, I wrote a column that used that as a courthouse location. And man, he just wanted to pick a fight. And then he starts yelling at me, "You can't walk away from me. I pay your salary." I was like, "You're in my yard. You want me to call the police for you trespassing? You're more." It was crazy. This is a perfectly pleasant person who, he and his wife, when we had our first child, brought over a present. We would make sure everything was okay with their house. If they were out of town, one time their dog got out. I helped round it up, and he just got broken by politics. Just a bitter person. Ultimately, we moved when I got my job at CNN, and then at Fox. We got out of the neighborhood over by Rosa Taylor. The local politics is nasty. Local politics is just nasty. People get mad at you for the craziest things, and it's not your fault. It's statewide politics is actually more pleasant. Like I think Kelly Loeffler can rehabilitate herself fairly easily into Atlanta society. Atlanta society loves money, and she's got it. Looks like they're selling the WNBA team as well. I always forget the WNBA exists, but looks like the WNBA, the dream, is up for sale, and she'll make money off of that. But who do you run? Who do you run if you're the Republicans? What's Casey Cagle doing? Part of the party won't want him. I don't think the governor would want him being the senator. Does Sonny Perdue want to run? Probably not. He's probably ready for retirement. Does Jeff Duncan run for the Senate instead of running for lieutenant governor again? I don't know who you run against Raphael Warnock. And the Republicans should have a deep bench of people to be able to do it. But this is going to be a problem for Republicans in Georgia moving forward. It's one of the things the governor's going to join me tomorrow. And we're actually going to have to record the conversation today. And they said it could be a long form, free form conversation, whatever I want to talk about. And then they asked, "What do you want to talk about?" I said, "I want to talk about the state of the Republican Party in Georgia. What's going to go on with the Republican Party in Georgia now? You've got a Republican Party in Georgia where half the party hates the other half, and the Democrats are fairly united. You've got a Republican Party in Georgia where some of the people have bought into conspiracy theories. You've got a Republican Party in Georgia where the base is convinced that the election in Georgia was stolen even though it wasn't. And you guys get mad at me for pointing it out. You've got a Republican Party in Georgia that has an urban, suburban, rural divisions. You've got suburban Republicans who won't support the party of Trump and rural Georgia who loves the party of Trump. How do you find someone to unite those two? Ironically, Brian Kemp is the best guy to do it. And the president has tried to poison the well with Kemp. So where do you find a candidate to run? When I think about the Republicans who are in office, maybe you get a Tom Graves. I wouldn't particularly care for Tom Graves running. I think Tom Graves ran as a conservative and sold him out when he got to Washington, and led to the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world. So I don't know, and this is something the GOP will have to grapple with in the state of Georgia. Do you get a Gary Black to run statewide from ag commissioner, rally the farm vote, get the suburban voters? Do you get John King to run for the Senate instead of insurance commissioner? John King is an intriguing candidate to me. The first statewide Hispanic statewide Hispanic officer in Georgia. He has not yet been elected. He will run for office. He will run for insurance commissioner with the Jim Beck situation. I don't think Beck can run again. His indictment is pending, and his resources will have to go to defend himself. It's weird to be in the Georgia Republican Party right now, is it not? You've got a chairman of the party who went after the statewide elected Republican Secretary of State for a theft of an election and talked down the election so much that he helped the Democrats win. So what do you do to David Schaefer? What happens to the Republican Party? I guess I'm gonna ask the governor about that. I'll be blunt, but I want to know what happens. You've got a party that talked itself out of victory in January. 75,000 fewer Republicans showed up to vote in North Georgia than showed up on Election Day, and they did so in large part because they thought there was nothing they could do. It was going to be stolen anyway. Given the margin of victory, had just the Republicans in North Georgia showed up, John Ossoff would not be in the United States Senate. David Perdue would. But when you had David Schaefer and Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene out there campaigning, saying the election was stolen, it was going to be stolen again, why bother showing up? It's not exactly a message of winning, that we were cheated, we were robbed, and they're going to rob us again. So I don't know. There are struggles faced by the GOP in Georgia, and they've got a year, really. They have a year to turn things around. You've got a legislative session right now. You will have a legislative session next year where they can put on a united front. They can figure out the education stuff. I think a lot of this stuff, they're so burnt out by what happened in the runoff. They're so burnt out by the election, by Biden winning the state, that the GOP doesn't really seem to have a governing unified agenda right now. And part of this is on the governor, but a lot of this is on the legislature, a legislature that divided itself up and fought over the election. A lot of it is on just the haphazard nature of what's going on in Georgia right now as Republicans lick their wounds over getting beat in races they should have won. They could have won. They would have won. If I had a recommendation for the Republican Party, it would be this. Go outside the box with a candidate. I still think Rich McCormick would be a fantastic Senate candidate. I think he wants to run for the House again, depending on redistricting. But I think Rich McCormick would be a great candidate. Now, many of you statewide don't know who Rich McCormick is. He's an emergency room doctor and a Marine. He's a good Christian guy. And he made fantastic inroads with the Asian American community and the Hispanic community in the 7th Congressional District, where he lost barely to Carolyn Bordeaux. And they're going to redistrict that area, and I think he's going to run again. But I wish he would run for the Senate, because I think he would be a compelling candidate. He connects well to suburban voters, and he connects well to rural voters. He connects well across racial and ethnic lines. He's kind of the guy that I would like to see run. But whether he runs or not, I think you got to find someone outside the box to run. Maybe a John Cowan from up in Northwest Georgia. He got into the runoff with Marjorie Taylor Greene. The problem there potentially could be that can he not alienate some of her voters in Northwest Georgia so that Warnock would win? Would she work against him? Possibly she would. And then what happens to her in redistricting? I don't want to belabor the point because I talked about it yesterday, but do they lump her and Barry Loudermilk in together, as is a rumor, to make them run against each other? The party's got to sort these things out. And the good news is they really do have time. They've got about a year. And a lot of what people are doing right now is they're just holding their breath on redistricting. What happens with redistricting? Who are the sacrificial lambs? It is not disputed at this point that there will be sacrificial lambs for the GOP. And those sacrificial lambs sometimes, well, they cause laws of unintended consequences to go into effect. Let's say, for example, let's take Burt Jones. Burt Jones, good guy. He's in the Jackson, Georgia area, the Locust Grove area, his district. Cuts in, he's actually, his district runs down into North Macon. Let's say that they punished him. They took him out of a committee chairmanship over the stolen election stuff. Let's say he's one of the sacrificial lambs and they redraw a district that keeps him out. Does he then run in a primary against Brian Kemp? Or do they run him for the Senate? You've got all these sorts of consequences that have to be figured out along the way. And I'm not sure that anyone is sitting down and thinking about these things clearly right now. In particular, the legislative session is a distraction to be thinking clearly about this stuff. But surely there is someone who can beat Raphael Warnock out there. And I don't think you have to have someone who's black, frankly. I don't think you have to have a black man or a white woman. You could have a white guy, I think, could still do that in the state of Georgia. The Democrats are going to scream racism no matter what. You know they are, so I wouldn't be cowed by that. But you're going to have somebody who's upbeat. And frankly, I think the Republicans in Washington are going to try putting enough stuff before the Senate that Warnock rejects that it's going to make it easier. He's going to have a record, and that record, I think, is going to match exactly what Loeffler exposed as he's far left. And to some degree, the Republicans will be able to run a race that says, we told you he was this far left. And a lot of Georgia voters will recoil at that and vote against him.
News and in-depth analysis.
All right, I gotta laugh at this. So Ron Watkins, the 8chan admin, he some people thought he was the original Q. He's kept QAnon afloat, according to Kevin Roose from the New York Times. He's thrown in the towel. Listen to this comment. Keep in mind, QAnon, that Donald Trump was going to lead a great global revolution against an international satanic cult of human traffickers led by the deep state and the Hollywood elite. And he was God's chosen. That this is the origination of QAnon. That Donald Trump is God's chosen. He's like the second coming of Cyrus or the second coming of Jesus. He's the Messiah. And he's going to fight the deep state, which is running an international child trafficking ring. Well, here's this guy, Ron Watkins, who's kept QAnon afloat for some time. Let me read you his comment. We gave it our all. Now we need to keep our chins up and go back to our lives as best we're able. We have a new president sworn in, and it is our responsibility as citizens to respect the Constitution, regardless of whether or not we agree with the specifics or details regarding officials who are sworn in. As we enter into the next administration, please remember all the friends and happy memories we made together over the past few years. I'll have more to say in a few days regarding a new project I'm currently fleshing out. God bless. People are livid. People are angry. I mean, honestly, what would you think? You spend 5 years believing that there is an international, coordinated by the deep state, child trafficking ring, and that Donald Trump is going to expose it. And he comes in, and everything you find, all of the Peter Strzok and Lisa Page stuff and the James Comey stuff, it's just confirmation that there is a sinister deep state and they're out to get Trump. Therefore, they probably know about this and they're trying to block him. And Trump keeps exposing them and winning. And he's going to win again. And look at what's happening. And it's all as Q foretold, and you invest your energy in it. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, and they're able to rush Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. And this is just, it's all confirmation of what you believe. It's confirmation bias at large. And this is all going to work out. And Donald Trump is going to win a second term because God has destined it. Because the satanic international child traffickers run by Hollywood and the global elite they're going to be beaten by the second coming of Donald Trump. And then the election is stolen. Oh, it must be stolen because Trump won. He won big. Those Dominion voter system machines were controlled by China and Iran and Russia, and Hugo Chavez is a zombie. And they stole the election. Let's hand count the ballots in Georgia. And yet the hand count of the ballot. Well, they must be printing out the ballots and altering the ballots. And on it goes. And then the Trump campaign doesn't actually file any lawsuits alleging voter fraud. Well, they must be part of the deep state. His lawyers who have gone to court to help him must be part of the deep state. They're out to get him. But don't worry, Donald Trump's got the military on his side. And then you get to yesterday, having emotionally invested in all of this, convinced the Supreme Court was going to side with Donald Trump, and they don't. It turns out they're all part of the deep state. But Bill Barr's going to say, no, he's part of the deep state. John Durham's going to say, no, he's part of the deep state. What? Mike Pence? Mike Pence is part of everybody's part of the deep state. And they can't stop. It turns out maybe Q is the friend you met along the way. And it turns out that God can't stop the international child trafficking Satanists, if you believe Q. That God's own anointed Donald Trump can't stop it. God's will apparently can be obstructed by the devil. These people, their theology is so backwards. But I gotta say, yes, I'm picking on these people, but I feel bad for the people who got so emotionally invested in QAnon. And people who don't even recognize it as QAnon, They've bought into some of the theories. They don't recognize it's derived from QAnon, but they really did believe God's will is for Donald Trump to be president again. Somehow God's will can be obstructed. The Almighty who spoke creation into being can be obstructed by a bunch of Democrats. Amazing. How small is your God? I feel bad for the people who bought into this, and now they're broken today because they were so emotionally invested in it, and it didn't go their way. It's like when you think you've got the winning lottery ticket, and in your head you've spent all the money, and then you lose the lottery, and you're deflated. I've done that this week. I didn't win the lottery. I know of which I speak. But man, nope. Q turns out just to be a letter of the alphabet. 30. And nothing more. Gosh, I do feel bad for the people who are emotionally spent. All right, well, we'll be back at this tomorrow, and then I got to go over to Louisiana for my mom's 78th birthday. But I will be with you tomorrow morning, and we will, well, see what all disasters come today, the first full day of Democrats in charge. God save